Hello and welcome to this episode of the What They Said podcast powered by Pretty Green, where we deep dive into everything to do with influencer marketing. We're being joined by some titans of the creator economy in the UK who are far more talented than I and have far more to say about their particular niche, whether it's an agent representing top talent, it's influencers themselves, or it's fellow marketers. This week, we're joined by Beth. Welcome to the podcast, Beth.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. I've pestered you long enough and you're here.
I'm here.
That's all that matters.
Yeah.
I've got a short bio for you that I'm going to read out, and if there's anything that I've forgotten, please feel free to jump in and tell me to shut up. And
I'm excited.
Okay, all right. I'll do my best. So Beth is head of talent at Sixteenth, a talent agency that I have a lot of time and respect for. I really appreciate the way that you work with influencers, and I think it's doing great for the industry. And we've worked extensively together over the years. You are directly responsible for some of the biggest names in the UK. Ellen Neal and Jack Edwards, to name just two. Partly because I'm biased, I think they're great. But you really do help elevate their strategy and take them to the next level. So welcome. And I think we've got a lot to chat through, and you've seen the questions. But could you share a little bit about your role as a talent agent broadly? And then I would love to dive into a little bit about 16th and how I think your USP is really building out good influence, but then also a strategy for influencers to think more long term as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, as a talent agency, we've been around for coming up to 7 years.
That's flown.
Yeah, I know. Crazy, right? I've personally been at the agency for 3 years. I was in PR and marketing before that for about 7 years.
The dark side.
The dark side, yes. Sorry, everyone.
There's a bit of a change then. Going
huge
approaching
change.
influencers and talent to now
For sure. I used to book a lot of talent. That was a big part of my role, was obviously work on the influence strategy for brands like Holland & Barrett, Kellogg's, some fun stuff. And I used to book a lot of talent.
Right.
And I realised very quickly that when I thought about going into talent management, there were a couple of agencies that I would definitely not go and work with based on my experiences on the agency side. And there
Are
are
you going to say names?
No, I'm not. Sorry.
We can deduce.
Yeah. But there was a couple that I would, 16th being one of them, and a role came up about 3 years ago, and I moved over to the talent management side. I did, and started looking after a lot of what would be known as like our study tube roster. So that is people like Jack Edwards, managed him for 3 years, Unjaded Jade, Ruby Granger, Queen Ruby, and yeah, so I started in kind of pure talent management, and then about a year and a half ago took on the head of talent role. So yeah, I guess in terms of like talent agencies, honestly, it can really differ, the experiences that people have depending on the agency that they go to. But speaking on behalf of 16th, we see our role as to bring in obviously commercial partnerships and be a commercial consultant to our creators. So that's helping them with their commercial positioning, if they want to earn more, how they can do that through their content. But we are very much managers as well at 16th. So yes, like you mentioned, we help them with their general strategy, where they want to go, long-term vision, blue skies, dreams, and all that stuff, helping people like, taking Jack as a really good example, how we can elevate him more into the mainstream and get him working with the BBCs and the Netflixes and the Valentinos like he's doing today, which is super
Yeah, I've seen he's been dressed by Valentino quite a few times recently.
Yes, yeah.
That feels like a real step in a very different direction.
Yeah,
it's quite interesting to
I
see
think
that.
it's really interesting. It's a bit of a trend at the moment, like high fashion and the connection between literature. So Valentino, Mont Blanc. There's a lot of brands doing some stuff around the literary space, which does help our Jack.
It does. I feel like for people listening, so you touched on StudyTube, and I think that's something I followed for the longest time, because I think StudyTube is essentially influencers and creators that were going through the throes of university themselves or college, and they shared their journey with their audience.
Yep.
Whether that's essentially a live stream of them studying or revising with them, which is a new trend that I've seen, or sharing the books they're reading, or just their uni journey in halls. And I think for me, that was a real turning moment for content online, because that's when it started to, I'd say, niche down. But I think that has a lot of negative connotations around it, because niche to a lot of brands makes them think, oh, that's small. For context, you're now talking about literary creators. So Jack and Ruby have really transitioned into creators that are sort of owning the BookTube, BookTok space.
I
with
mean,
millions of views and followers.
the majority of our roster, come from a space similar to that. So whether that's education or career, or we do have other creators, but a lot of them come from that space. And I think our roster as a whole has a combined audience of 54 million or something. So it's like,
If you want to reach the
yeah,
UK,
yeah. And if you want to, also, I always think if you want to reach people who are what we would call kind of ready to move. So if that's people who want to better themselves, who want to, change something about their lives, they're the kind of people who are watching people like Jack and Ruby and Jade. And they're also the kind of people who are probably going to buy your product because they have that personal motivation to do so. So yeah, brands, if you're listening, Solitude.
I feel like
forward.
I can speak firsthand from working with the likes of Eleanor. So Eleanor is a big fan. Eleanor's a true crime creator, and I argue she's probably one of the biggest in the world.
She's the UK's
She's
queen.
definitely
The UK's queen of true crime.
Queen of true crime.
Yeah.
And when we consider that true crime is hugely popular with female audiences in the UK, and that most of them are probably watching Eleanor, and she's getting like 500,000 views plus per video.
Yeah, I think her average is 850.
Wow, even more.
Yeah,
but it just shows you the potential creators like Eleanor and Jack have, and I think I always use them as sort of to illustrate how most audiences seem to begin on YouTube with these creators that form this really core base of followers, and then follow them on cross-platform.
Yeah, for sure.
And if you see TikTokers, often people are quite hard pressed to name a TikToker, but they can name the type of content they make.
So true.
Whereas if you think of a creator like Jack, or a YouTube creator, you think Eleanor, Jack.
It's the reason I just would describe 16th as a YouTube first agency, because we are.
I didn't want to put that word in your mouth.
Well, yeah, we are 100%, and there's a real, strategic reason behind that, and that is that creators who can hold attention in 2024 for 30, 40, 40. Eleanor's videos can be 2 hours long, and she's holding attention for that time. That is such a rarity, such a dying art. In the endless world of just scroll, maybe never see that face again. You can hold people's attention in long form. They're gonna, you can do anything. And so that's why most of our guys have some form of a YouTube channel. We're never, I'm seeing lots of agencies popping up at the moment, talent agencies, and their full roster is just TikTok. And listen, it might be working in some areas, but I just think the lifespan of creators is so much shorter on a platform like TikTok. It's got so many positives when it comes to reach and reaching, huge audiences. And but in terms of longevity, which is a huge thing for us at 16th, we're all about long-term strategy over short-term gain. That's one of our values. My founder, Daniel, will be very happy that I got that in.
If you could lace more throughout the podcast,
yeah,
I'm sure.
I'll just drop them in. And yeah, we're all about longevity, and that really does, we believe, like if you can hold people in long form, then they'll follow you to wherever you go.
Definitely. I think for comparison, if you look at the average watch time on TikTok and Instagram, it's like 2 seconds. YouTube is 4 minutes.
Yeah.
Slightly longer if you remove music videos from the mix. But then you look at your talent, and true for a lot of YouTube creators is that their watch time will be 13, 14, 15 minutes plus. So the view retention on YouTube is really important. And
100%.
definitely we see it as having more sort of potential to drive performance or community cross-platform versus maybe a TikTok first creator.
Yeah.
That's not to say they don't, but you also often see a lot of TikTok creators, and you've probably definitely seen this. They'll smash it on TikTok, and suddenly they'll get an agent who are trying to get them to launch a YouTube channel because it consolidates their viewership.
Yeah.
This kind of brings me. We haven't even started my question. I haven't even started my questions yet.
Just chatting away.
Smacking the microphone as I do it. In terms of signing new talent, there could be influencers listening to this or watching this that are thinking, I need to get an agent. Beth said all the right things. I'm looking for that strategic elevation, that counsel. Can you talk us through the process of signing new talent?
Yeah.
And if someone's perhaps not at the level, how can they look out for a bad agent? Like, what are some tropes they should be cautious of?
Yeah. I could talk about this for hours, so I'm going to try to keep it short. I think
we have half hour.
Okay, my first public service announcement to any influencers listening is do not sign with the first agency that reaches out to you, because I see this happening more and more, and I get it, right? Again, when we go back to the idea of TikTok, I don't want to say easy at all, but it is easier to kind of reach that like 20, 30, 40K following on TikTok, right? And you have an agency reach out and it's flattering and you're like, yeah, like I've also had a brand reach out and I've got no idea what that contract says. So this makes sense. I'm going to sign with them. And if that agency is offering you anything longer than like 3 months, like do not do it. I just think there are so many.
Do you think 3 months in the first instance is a good
I think at that
period?
size, I just think we have creators who did it on their own. For Angela is a great example, one of our beauty creators. She did it on her own for like 5 years, and she is one of the most incredible professionals to work with on our side because she knows, what we look for in contracts. She understands our side of things. She really kind of understood the industry as a whole and then handed her business over. So yeah, don't sign too early would be my advice. I appreciate
There's
that.
no rush.
No, there's no rush. And I do get that it's daunting. But there is so much free resource online around support with things like rate cards, media kits, contracts to a degree. Again, I appreciate that they are niche. Yeah, just don't sign early. Don't rush it. I always tell people to do it on their own for at least a year first.
Yeah.
Because I just think you can then go into whoever you go to, whatever management, and you'll actually understand what they're saying to you, and you'll understand if they're lying to you. You'll understand if they're giving you BS about something that's happened, because you'll be able to say, actually, I understand contracts and I understand how negotiations work and I understand what brands mean when they say X, Y, and Z. So yeah, my first advice is just don't rush and do it on your own for a year. And I guess when it comes to like what to look for, yeah, length of terms, we work to, make sure you've got a probation term in there. Ours is 3 months. And then we move on to a 1 year rolling. So that just allows us to, it does take a while to build a relationship. So 1 year is probably the standard, but don't be locking yourselves in. I've heard of people on 5 year contracts and
I'd love to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah.
I remember when I was looking at joining, when I was a creator previously, I've said it on every bloody podcast now, and I was bringing it up, but I think it's really interesting because I'm probably naive at the time. I was approached by agents that wanted rev share of my YouTube channel as well.
Oh, right, yeah.
No. And the advice I got at the time was, but they're not helping you do that. So is that something that 16th's ever done?
No, we don't. We're standard. We're 2080. It's the kind of typical Hollywood model. It hasn't changed since we launched 7 years ago. That in itself has pros and cons, but we don't take rev share because and unless an agent,
unless you were putting heavy production
unless it's I'm conscious that there are some talent management agencies cropping up who are also production houses in some degree.
It's a different scenario.
And it's a different scenario, and I think if they're really investing in putting on a series around you, then that's very different. But if it's just purely that they're going to earn from your YouTube, what is the incentive to go out and get you brand partnerships? Because they'll just be taking 20% of your rev share for doing nothing, and could be bringing you nothing, and that's crazy. Because the reason the agency dynamic works is that we only earn if our talent earns. So, like, hell, am I going to make sure my talent are earning? You know?
Exactly. That makes sense. I hadn't really thought about that point as well. That if they're getting the rev share, then what's the incentive for them to go and get more work? Talking about brand partnerships, I think it's fair to say that balancing what influencers want and what brands want, particularly for people like yourself and me, for the client, and you for the talent, we're often trying to discuss points, not actually us, but like comes that happy middle ground.
We argue all the time. What you're about.
We argue all the time. It can be tricky. So have you got any stories that you're happy to share where you've just had to say no, even if the fee was really good? Maybe there were some horror stories that you've got. I'm not sure if you want to go into brand names or.
I can talk about a brief that we had that we actually declined. That I found quite crazy, and I'm sure everyone saw it. The Madeline RG Google TikTok that she did, where she was unboxing.
I did see this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
you were approached for that.
We were approached by that. I'm not going to say for who, talent-wise, but all I can say is they were if you could imagine, the opposite of Madeline RG in every way, like content, style, who they are as a person, just delivery. They could not be further apart. And the brief we received was exactly the same. Like, we'll just turn up. We'll be there for like 15 minutes. Could you just could he just like unbox it and then we'll leave? And we declined it because I was just like, red flags written all over this. Like, you know,
Too prescriptive.
it was, don't get me wrong, there was big money in it, but like we said, no, this is not right. And then we saw that content going out. And I think that for me was a real moment of like, who's running these campaigns and this, like, I don't know, I just think if you can put the same brief to two different creators in that sense that are so polar opposites,
it kind of misses the point of influence.
It was just, to me, that was real madness. Like, I just think you're just throwing money down the drain at this point. So that was a recent one. Anything else?
Has there ever been an instance where, because of the values that you have as an agency and where you've aligned with your talent on, you know, lines in the sand of who they won't partner with, has there ever been an instance where a brand that you felt has been like an inauthentic partnership, has come at you with a very good fee, and it's been tempting, but you've had to say, look, this is just not a good fit for you based on our long-term strategy?
Yeah, I think when I was kind of talent managing more day to day, you know, I had my own roster of, like I said, people like Jade and Ruby. I used to talk a lot about how proud I was that we had quite a high decline rate, because what I used to say to brands was, yeah, because it means when we say yes, it's a hell yes. So, you know, if anyone knows people like Unjaded Jade or Ruby Granger, like, you know, they are so conscious, you know, socially conscious and socially aware that, yeah, we were declining stuff all the time if it didn't fit who they were as creators, you know, the brand, where the brand is sourced, or, you know, where they're founded, or how they source their products, you know, all of that stuff we were looking into all the time. Also, you know, socioeconomic situations happen. There's a war, you know, multiple wars on at the moment that will impact the brands that we work with because of who they're affiliating with. And, you know, that's,
I think this is a really interesting point to point out. And the reason I want to talk to you about it is because I think there's a misconception. I mean, it is more nuanced when you think about the platforms. I think YouTube creators can afford to be more picky because they're being propped up by ad revenue.
Yeah.
But generally, I think brands think that they approach with work, because often there's short timelines.
Yeah.
And they'll say, don't worry, they'll want to take this partnership on.
Yeah.
And even if it's only a 2-week period to produce content.
Yeah.
And I think that's unfair because they don't appreciate that actually the influencer has every right to say no to the partnership.
For sure. But I also just don't know if there are that many management agencies also doing the same thing, which I get it. You, like I said earlier, that you're there to make money, but that's where our real core value of longevity comes into play. And when we can, you know, have conversations internally where we'll say, if we decline this, or if we go ahead with this, will this limit actually what we get in next month, because there's going to be a backlash, or there's going to be controversy, or it's not going to align and it's not going to perform well. Like, it's about seeing, if we say no to this, what are we saying yes to in the future? So I think that's why clients, I get it all the time. I'll say no and they'll be like, no, like, what do you mean no?
True. They do say no all the time. They're busy. But I think that's a position of power for the influencer as well. And I think it's brands. We work with so many brands that are totally aware of this. Often there are those out there, and certainly my years of being on the agency side, I've seen that so many just expect, they'll be thrilled to have this partnership, and actually oftentimes they're not. And we really have to sell in what the value of the partnership would be.
Yeah, and it's great that that's happening, because that's the other thing, is sometimes we get, you know, the brand name, the price, and the timings, and we haven't even got a brief, and I'll say, well, you know, I'll take it to Jack when I've got a brief, and he knows what it's like being offered a job and somebody saying, oh, you're going to work at, you know, Sony, and here's the salary. Okay, what is the job? Oh, you don't need
and drabs of
you don't need to worry about it.
Full brief and
it's like, would you accept that job? No, of course you wouldn't. No. Like, so I don't get that.
You said something a moment ago, and I wanted to put it out. If there's ever backlash, so have there been any instances where, because I think brands worry about influencers causing the backlash, but vice versa.
Yeah, of course.
Influencers are far too aware of the backlash they can receive by partnering with a brand. So it's definitely a two-way street. Have there been an instance where you've partnered with, obviously we don't need to say brand names or talent names, what happens if there's backlash against an influencer for partnering with a brand that you were perhaps unaware of there were any issues around that? How do you navigate that?
Yeah, it's a really tricky one, because it obviously just really depends on what the scale of it is. We've had a couple that have been around like charitable partnerships where audiences have not understood that we that there was no payment taken or that the payment was donated, but they've kind of taken things out of context around working with charities, which is something we encourage all of our creators to do. It's an amazing thing to be aligned with,
A hero charity.
that really works for them. So we've had stuff around that. Sustainability is a huge one, and I think, transparently, like I get asked a lot, like, why don't you create content and like stuff like this, that I'm like, I would never do it, because there is no right answer to it. I see the most, sustainable creators still getting, oh my God, you used this one product and it's got a plastic head, or like, so sustainability is quite a big one. And typically we'll just ask clients for FAQs.
So you do all you can to have sort of safety milestones.
Yeah, and all contracts will have something in it around, whose responsibility is it to respond to comments that are negative. So yeah, I think our biggest concern, ultimately we represent the creators, so our biggest concern in those situations is the talent okay? Do they feel like they are equipped with the tools to handle this? What are their DMs like? What kind of messages are they getting? And do we need to kind of bring in a duty of care element to this? We have recommended therapists at 16th. That is an initiative that our creators can access. So that's people who are like vetted through us and have an understanding of the entertainment industry. So
that's really interesting.
Yeah, it was something that actually, again, Jade brought up a couple of years ago and said, she'd been seeking therapists, and transparently had sat with some and they'd gone, well, what have you got to be upset about? You've got, millions of pounds and all this fame and all this stuff. And, she struggled. So we found some people who had kind of experience working with people in the entertainment industry and the unique pressures that come with it. And so it might be that, if there's backlash, our creators access that kind of thing.
And burnout and things like that, I imagine.
Yeah, burnout's a huge thing that they can access that like support for. It's just also a super lonely place. Like, I'm sure creators say this all the time, but it's the most connected, lonely career, I think.
I think from my experience, but also friends that are still, I know how isolating the experience is, and which might sound crazy to say, because these people have got millions of followers or hundreds of thousands of followers, and they're really connected and they get messages all time of day, but you're alone.
Yeah,
often
100%.
talking to a camera.
Yeah.
And then you're in a little echo chamber. So sometimes the decisions you make might not be the right ones to make unless you've got counsel around you.
And I think
so it's good to see that you're feeling that role of support.
And when you see, when your whole world is online, like theirs is, their entire career is in online. When something happens like backlash, it's all consuming, and it's really hard to. I, as the manager, can look at it and go, I'll blow over. Like, we're good.
Because you've got that aerial view.
Because I've got that aerial view, and it's not me on that is holding that phone where things are blowing up. So, it's it's not. I don't mean to kind of, there was also amazing perks and whatnot of being a creator.
Yes,
they also have amazing lives.
Swings and roundabouts to navigate.
Yeah, I always think it's worth just highlighting that there are tough times as well for them.
So we've kind of spoken about the negative backlash and the horror stories that might come with that. But equally, obviously, 16th is really about that purposeful partnership and accountable activation. Do you have any positive stories that have come from your time being talent side? Maybe brands have gone on a journey with you and thought about things slightly differently. What have you found?
Yeah, let's talk about fun ones. I think there's a few that come to mind. Do you know what I think? And they haven't paid me to say this, but the Cluedo campaign last year with Ellie, Ellen and Neil, like that was so fun, because I think there are so many, the influencer marketing buzzwords at the moment are all around like creative freedom and creative this and creative that, and then actually, it's just the same old brief that we had a year ago or 2 years ago, and actually getting that brief in and being like, for context, we worked together on Hasbro, Cluedo, and you had Ellen and Neil come in along with a load of other amazing creators, and you worked with a really amazing concept photographer who effectively turned Eleanor into a Cluedo character.
She looks
insane. Like, she looks so cool. But that is like a, project. If there are brands listening and you want to know how to like really get creators invested in your brand, it's doing that kind of stuff. It's really thinking outside the box. She got to use that content, post it across her channel. She got an amazing shoot day with you guys. that was so much fun and just such a cool way to use a creator like Eleanor, who
And her
typically
audience so resonates with Cluedo messaging.
yeah, like
It was a perfect partnership.
it was such a perfect partnership, and I couldn't have imagined anything better. And yeah, so stuff like that where we can actually come in and the talent can really get creative. And then yeah, anything that also has a real world impact. So we had one of our gaming creators, Sophie, last week. She was live streaming for a couple of hours with a brand, with Hellman's, the condiment brand, which seems a bit random, right? You've got like female gamer live streaming on Twitch, Hellman's mayonnaise.
It works,
but it works, right?
Works.
And they did a really nice kind of socio-economic piece around again, forgive me. If anyone is listening who's really into gaming, I'm going to mess up all of these words because it's not my forte. That's why we have someone on the team doing our gaming. But it was like live streaming on Twitch, and you could donate.
Live donations.
And it actually went to help food banks across the UK.
Do you know how much she managed to raise?
I don't know if we've got the final numbers.
If we find out after this.
Yeah.
But I think that's so interesting that firstly, the Cluedo campaign was absolutely amazing to work on. When we were talking to you about, we'd love to get Eleanor on, I think there was a touch and go moment where she wasn't interested, and then heard about the full concept. She loved it, and she was like, yes. And since then, I kid you not, I've bumped into friends that have nothing to do with influencer marketing, and they've all seen that campaign. And I was like, well, this is crazy. And another brand that I was talking to the other day said, oh, did you do the Cluedo campaign? I was like, how? Yeah. But Cluedo's such a household name. Eleanor, household name for true crime lovers. It was just a perfect match. But also on the donation point, I think we have to remember how generous audiences are, particularly to causes their creators really believe in. So to see that how many donations you got, it doesn't matter. It's just the fact that it had some sort of impact in the real world. And we see that with the sort of creator first events and things like that, that audiences care and they're motivated to do something.
For sure. And I think particularly if you were talking about, I guess, our types of creators in the sense that they are giving value online. So that is how I would summarize all of our creators when we talk about what does good influence mean. It's people who are doing something positive online but giving value for free, effectively. You know, when you think of people like Ali Abdul, right, one of our biggest YouTubers, he has spent years online just giving out free advice, business, financial, team building advice. So people feel really indebted to them. Same as somebody like Jade, right? She didn't just go on YouTube and show, what cute things she was wearing. Like, that there's a space for that. But she went on YouTube and she helped people literally get into their dream universities. I sat in a prep once with Jade by Tottenham Court Road, and we had about 5 or 6 people come up to us in a really short space of time, probably an hour or so. And these weren't people who were going, can I have a picture? They were coming up and saying, oh my God, thank you. You helped me pass this exam. You helped me get into my dream university. You helped me have the confidence to go traveling by myself. So people feel really indebted to our types of creators. And so what that shows up as is this kind of idea of like force of like reciprocity, where it's like when Jade posts an ad, because they're like, Jade helped me do this incredible thing. They're not thinking like, they're not thinking, oh God, another ad from Jade. They're thinking, wow, like she's succeeding. She helped me succeed. We're all succeeding together. And it shows up in high levels of engagement for, the creators, but also for brands, their brand partnerships. Most of our guys' average engagement rates are like 10% plus because people don't switch off and think, oh, you're just take. It's all about giving value. So
that's such a true point. I feel like there's been a real shift in the culture around brand partnerships. I remember 2013, 14, 15, it was like, oh, you do a brand deal and you'd be like, oh my God, like what's the audience going to think? Don't come for me. And now it's like, get that bag. Like, we want you to want you to do well. So I think there has been a real change around that.
And as long as you bring your audience on the journey as well, I think somebody like Jack does that super, super well, where, he's not the same kid he was 4 or 5 years ago when he started posting his little Durham vlogs.
Businessman now.
He's a fully fledged businessman walking around in Valentino, but like he'll never make you feel like that. His audience are there on the journey with him, and they're celebrating every step of his achievements as if they are their own, which they are. He's so grateful to everyone who has followed him from day one.
So we're seeing creator-owned brands really at the forefront of what consumers deem as cool and trendy, which makes me feel really uncool and trendy saying that. So whether that's like Logan Paul and KSI with Prime, or Beast Burger by Mr. Beast, huge brands that have really dominated in the US, and obviously Prime. I think most parents were queuing up to get a Prime drink at one point. What do you think is next for UK creators in that space? And do you think there is space in the UK for influencers to launch their own brands? Is it the same sort of culture as it is in the US?
Interesting. I think there is a huge disparity between the UK and the US influencer marketing industries in general. I think there are huge differences, not just market size, but particularly like the way consumers engage with creators and the types of creators they engage with. I've always found it super interesting that we don't have the Alex Cooper, the Alex Earl, equivalents here in the UK. And I think it's just because of who we are as, the British mentality of, not letting people get that high effectively and trying to bring them down before they get there. So I think there's a lot of differences in the way that consumers engage with creators in the UK. I guess when it comes to products specifically, I think we did it. I'll transparently, like as I can be. We had 16th. We launched a planner brand around Jack, right? When he was at university, it was a study planner brand. And, when you think of the journey he's been on over those couple of years where that brand was out, he left university. He wasn't a student anymore. And we had a student brand connected to him. He then went into books and became, the biggest booktuber in the world. And still had a student study brand connected to him. And so I think if you're going to do it, I think it has to be something that has that real longevity. And I think, you do have to be at that Sidemen level. I think it's so expensive. It's
a lot of investment.
So I just don't think people think about, warehouses and shipping and customer service, right? Customer service, responding to customers, because you have to have that, so I think I get it and it looks super fun. And I think there's also this like craving for creators to have something that they can like physically hold, because so much of their career in their world is in the digital space, right?
Intangible,
so it's this intangible thing. So I think there's this real still craving for people to be able to hold something in a shop or out in the world and say, I made this. So I really get that. But I think I personally would always, if our creators, there's very few creators who we would really launch something around now, and it would have to be like the perfect thing, and it would be with a specialist company who do that stuff. I think if anyone is looking for more like physical products, I think doing it in collaboration with a brand, really finding, who is that brand that it already exists that I completely resonate with, that I can go to and bring out an edit with or a range with, and actually, see how that sells first.
It's much safer, isn't it?
Because if it doesn't sell out within a minute or a couple of minutes, I probably wouldn't go investing into a own brand company that takes, millions and millions of pounds to run.
Definitely. I think we've seen over the years the likes of Saffron Barker with Primark. I think Gymshark even do their own partnerships with influencers
100%.
online as well. And I think there's a much safer way for influencers to get into testing the market.
Exactly. And it is that you can see how you sell, as I say, see how things sell, and if there's a consumer demand there. And I'm sure there are, it's a shame that it is so expensive to launch these products, because I'm sure there is so many creators with so many amazing ideas out there. But finding the investment to launch it is tough, sadly.
Conscious of the time, and I've got one big question to close on. What's next in influencer marketing? Appreciate that is a big question.
That is a really big question.
But over the last few years, we've seen influencer content become more niche. So like study tubers really dominating student space, true crime creators, ASMR creators, up to them being included in media plans as a core element. So we've got paid ads that utilize influencer content as a core pillar, not just a secondary thought. From your perspective, because I think it's quite an interesting one with your long-term goals and your values as a business, what's hot and what's not, and what do you think the next big thing is this year, but even further afield?
How do I whittle this down? I think
if you've got more than one, that's
I think long form is everyone's saying it's dead. I disagree wholeheartedly. Like I was saying earlier, I think
TikTok's introducing
exactly you're turning it now, because I think they've clocked on to the lifespan of their creators is super short. So long form for me is definitely still going to be taking priority. But we're talking a lot internally about the idea of like FaceTime content when it comes to creative strategy. So that type of content where you feel like you're FaceTiming a friend and you're putting it on in the background, and you're, you know, I never FaceTime my friends and just sit there. I'll FaceTime my friends and I'll be cooking dinner, or I'll be getting ready, or so I think in terms of like content for this year and content style, I think that will become bigger than ever.
That's a really interesting take. I hadn't really thought about that. It's the same with podcasts, right?
Yeah,
exactly. You'll pop it on while you're doing something else.
Yeah, exactly.
Driving the car, or
100%.
walking around the house.
Because it's like our attention spans are getting shorter, but I do think people are feeling like scroll fatigue. I certainly am. Like
100%.
it's just never ending. Like I sometimes imagine
Doom scrolling.
I sometimes imagine TikTok as like this, you know, what's like underneath my phone, and it's just this like endless pit of content that like terrifies me. So yeah, I think like this choice fatigue as well, that plays into it. So this idea that people are not wanting to choose what they watch anymore, which is again where I think the rise of niche creators like Jack have worked so well, because you go to Jack's channel and you can put on any video and you kind of know what you're going to get. It's like comfort food, isn't it? It's like going to your favorite restaurant.
Yeah.
So I think
safe space that you
exactly. And I guess when it comes to the industry generally, I think kind of taking on more of the like US blueprints with things like I obviously come at it from a management perspective, but I think like specialist agencies and stuff popping up. I think we're starting to find that. So people who really specialize in audio, really specialize in production, that kind of thing, I think is going to get bigger, and that happens a lot in the US. You know, they have agents and they have managers and they have bigger teams. I think generally is what I'm getting at. I think creators will start to have bigger teams.
Yeah.
And anything else? I think no, I just think, you know, it's not going anywhere is the other thing. It's
still dominating. But just like TV's not going anywhere, I feel like we're going to see the media landscape continue to diversify.
For sure. And actually
Be real and Threads.
Yeah.
R.I.P.
R.I.P. Actually, that would be the last thing. I think, you know, brands really understanding that YouTube and short form content is the new TV now, and it is the replacement of that, and that people are watching YouTube more than they are TV. And like you were saying, having creators through the line and across all areas of advertising, actually seeing creators as, you know, the stars of your show and the stars of your brand, rather than kind of something that you tag on to something else that's happening bigger over here.
Totally agree. We usually include quickfire, but we've kind of run out of time. But we did go through some before we started recording. So I said to you, Crocs and socks. Do you have an opinion on that?
I love Crocs and socks. I'm also really into socks and heels at the moment. I saw a lot of that at Fashion Week, and I'm feeling that. So
you're a serial.
I love a sock
and a shoe.
Bare feet for me freak me out. Socks all the way.
Okay. Well, do you know? I'll actually ask you some of the other ones.
Okay.
I think they are quite interesting. TikTok shop. You've not bought anything.
I have bought one thing, but I just think
experience.
No, it was fine, but I felt bad about it for like the environment for a while. I couldn't sleep that night, and I just
what did you buy?
Just this like little keychain. Ridiculous. But I also just think it's killing TikTok. Personally, yeah, I think like I went, you know, you scroll and 4 out of 5 videos are either a branded ad or a TikTok shop ad, and I think
because you bought once now.
Yeah, it is crazy, but I'm hearing that a lot. So yeah, no for me.
Okay. I'm gonna go through all these. Okay. Facebook or X? Can we call it Twitter?
We can call it Twitter.
Facebook or Twitter?
I don't even have Facebook actually, so
really?
Twitter.
I recently deleted mine.
Yeah.
It's so much better for it.
Yes. Yeah.
X or YouTube?
YouTube.
YouTube or Instagram?
YouTube.
YouTube or TikTok?
YouTube.
I sense a trend. YouTube or Snapchat?
YouTube.
WhatsApp or Snapchat?
WhatsApp.
Gifting or paid partnerships?
Paid partnerships.
Out of actually quickly, in a week, how many gifting opportunities do you think float your desk?
Actually, I'm having to look into inbox solutions at the moment just as well. Oh, gifting.
Really?
Yeah. But like, don't get me wrong, they do serve a purpose. Like,
yes,
I'm
for like smaller brands, things like that.
Yeah, and just building relationships and yeah, but it is. We have 36 talent who are
your inbox is full.
So the inboxes are full. Yeah.
Like to post this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Follow or subscribe.
Oh, what's the difference? You mean?
Well, YouTube or Instagram, I guess.
Yeah, subscribe.
Agency or platforms? As in like social influencer platforms?
Agency.
Right answer. And then podcasts or YouTube videos?
I'm actually going to go podcast on
Are
this
you?
one. Yeah, big podcast
What
fan.
do you listen to? We're gonna learn a lot about
Usual
you.
disclaimer by Eleanor Neal. Voice notes by John Teresa. No, I listen to. Do you know what my favorite podcast
Go on.
is? It's the Hamish and Andy podcast. If anyone's not heard it,
I haven't.
It's the biggest podcast in Australia, and it's two guys who just chat
Rubbish.
and it's
I'm gonna check it out.
hilarious. So yeah, would recommend.
Love Island. Insta stories or lives?
Stories.
That was it. So that was the quick fire.
Easy.
You probably
What
heard
was the
one.
Crocs one? The rest,
I
the
just
rest were all
I was gonna
influencer.
make you feel comfortable.
Okay,
you
fine.
Know, like Crocs or socks,
I
inoffensive.
feel like everyone knows me better now. So.
I do wear Crocs. They're my backdoor shoes.
Yeah. Everyone needs a backdoor shoe.
Everyone need a backdoor shoe. Or like a pop out the front shoe.
Take the bins
They
out.
are, the bin shoe. You heard it here first. Crocs are the perfect backdoor pop out to the front shoe. Thank you, Beth, for joining us
Thank you
today.
for having me.
I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. We covered a lot of territory. But if people want to find out more about 16th,
yes,
or yourself,
yep,
how can they find you?
Yeah, find me on LinkedIn, or 16th. We're at 16th Talent across every platform, so you can head to our TikTok and you can see my team pissing about,
team pictures,
or head to our Instagram and you'll see all the things that our talent are working on.
And your website is 16th.co.
Just co.
So dot. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. We hope you enjoyed it. Please make sure you leave it a review wherever you listened or watched. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube, and please make sure you check out 16th Talent at 16th.co and all the links that you can find in the description. And Beth, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And we will speak to you again next time, where we go through more influencer icks, what makes the creator economy turn in the UK, with far more talented people than I. And see you again next time.